The house was never the same after Grandma passed away. It wasn't just the silence that changed it. It was the way the silence felt heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something kind that would never come back. Her chair in the corner still faced the window, the same window she used to sit by every morning with a cup of tea, watching the birds fight over crumbs in the garden. No one had the courage to move it, at least not yet. I used to think grief made people softer. I was wrong. It made them sharper. It started on the day of the reading of Grandma's estate. The lawyer came with a brown leather folder, speaking in a calm voice that didn't match the storm already building inside the house. My father sat on one side of the room, arms crossed tightly, jaw clenched like he was holding back words that could break glass. My mother sat on the other side, eyes fixed on the floor, but her fingers tapping nervously on her knee. Between them, there was a distance that felt wider than the entire house. I sat quietly in the corner, pretending to be invisible, but I could feel everything. When the lawyer started listing Grandma's assets, land, savings, jewelry, the old house, something in the air shifted. My father leaned forward immediately, his voice cutting through the room. She always said I would handle the property, he said firmly. My mother scoffed under her breath, but it was loud enough to hear. Funny, she replied coldly, because she told me something very different when she was alive. That was the moment the room stopped being a room and became a battlefield. The lawyer tried to continue, but no one was listening anymore. Words like legal share and inheritance distribution faded into background noise as voices rose, sharper and louder with every second. My father stood up first, pointing toward the documents like they had personally insulted him. My mother followed immediately, matching his anger like a mirror that reflected only rage. You were never there for her the way I was, my mother snapped, and you think you were. My father shot back. She stayed with me when she needed real support, not excuses. Each sentence felt like a stone thrown at something fragile between them. But what broke me wasn't their fight, it was how quickly they forgot she was gone. Grandma wasn't even cold in the ground, and already she had become a reason to argue instead of a person to mourn. I remember looking around the room, hoping someone would stop it, but no one did. Even the lawyer looked uncomfortable, like he had stepped into something he couldn't legally fix. Outside, the wind pushed against the windows, rattling them softly. It sounded like Grandma's house was trying to speak, but no one was listening. The arguments didn't stop that day. They followed us home like a shadow that refused to leave. Every conversation turned into suspicion. Every silence felt like a hidden accusation. My father started locking files in his room. My mother began calling relatives late at night, her voice low but urgent. And the house, once filled with the smell of Grandma's cooking and her soft humming, became colder with each passing hour. I walked through the hallway one evening and saw my mother standing in front of Grandma's old cupboard. She wasn't crying, she wasn't even angry, she was just staring, like she expected the wood to explain something to her. She always favored your father, she whispered when she noticed me. I didn't know what to say. Later that night, I heard my father on the phone in his room. She changed her mind at the end. He said firmly, I know she did. She trusted me more. 2 people. 2 truths. 1 dead woman caught between them. That's when I realized something painful. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about pride, about years of resentment finally finding a legal excuse to explode, and I was stuck in the middle of it. No one asked how I felt. No one noticed how I stopped eating properly, or how I started sleeping with the light on. They were too busy turning love into evidence and memories into weapons. But the strangest part was the wooden box. It sat quietly in the corner of Grandma's room, untouched, dusty, almost invisible. Small, simple, carved from old wood with faint patterns worn down by time. Everyone walked past it like it didn't matter, but I kept noticing it. Because in a house full of shouting adults and broken trust, that silent little box felt like the only thing that still remembered who Grandma really was. The wooden box didn't belong in the noise that had taken over the house. It sat in Grandma's room like it had survived something no one else understood. Small, simple, made of old brown wood with faint carvings along its edges, flowers, maybe, or something that once meant something to her hands. Time had softened its shine, but not its presence. Even when everything else in the house felt unstable, that box remained still, almost stubbornly calm. No one touched it. That was the strange part. In a house where people were already arguing over land, money, and memories, a physical object that clearly belonged to Grandma was being ignored. My father passed by it once without even glancing. My mother saw it, paused for half a second, then turned away like it wasn't worth her attention. "It's probably just old papers or junk," my mother said one evening when I mentioned it. My father didn't even look up from his phone. If it mattered, she would have told us. But I knew Grandma better than that. She never left things without meaning. I remember her sitting in that very room, running her fingers over the box like it was something alive. She never opened it in front of anyone. If someone entered the room, she would gently place her hand on top of it, like she was protecting a secret. Once, when I was younger, I asked her what was inside. She smiled at me softly. "Someday you'll understand," she said. I didn't think much of it back then. Children don't understand weight behind words like that. But now, standing in a house where adults screamed over her belongings, those words came back to me with uncomfortable clarity. "Someday you'll understand." The fighting grew worse as days passed. The lawyer came again, trying to bring order, but order had already left the house. My parents had stopped speaking directly, and instead communicated through accusations sent across rooms. She manipulated everything. My father said one evening, voice sharp enough to cut through the air, "I know she changed the documents. She told me she trusted me more than anyone." My mother replied instantly, "Maybe she just stopped trusting you." Their voices didn't just fill the house anymore. They poisoned it. I started avoiding common areas. I ate less. I spoke less. It felt like the house was shrinking, like the walls were closing in on all the grief no one wanted to admit. But the wooden box stayed the same. One night I couldn't sleep. The arguments had been particularly loud that day, echoing through the hallway long after midnight. I lay awake listening to footsteps, doors opening and closing, voices rising and falling like waves that never reached calm water. At some point, I got up. I don't know why I went to Grandma's room. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was curiosity. Or maybe it was the feeling that something in this house still belonged to truth, even if no one else was looking for it. The room was colder than I remembered. Moonlight slipped through the curtains, falling softly on the wooden box. It almost looked like it was waiting for me. I stood there for a long time before I moved. My hands hesitated when I reached for it. I felt guilty, like I was breaking something sacred. But then I thought about Grandma sitting alone, about how everyone had turned her memory into arguments, and I felt something heavier than guilt. I opened it. Inside there was no gold, no hidden treasure, no dramatic surprise like people imagine in stories. There were letters, neatly folded, tied with thin thread. Some were yellowed with age, others looked more recent. On top of them lay a small envelope with my name written on it in Grandma's handwriting. My breath stopped for a moment. I didn't open it yet. My fingers moved deeper into the box, trembling slightly now. Beneath the letters were documents carefully arranged, labeled, and signed. Legal papers, notes, and something that looked like a personal journal, its pages filled with her handwriting. But what struck me most was the quiet intention behind everything. This wasn't random, this was prepared. Grandma hadn't just left memories behind. She had left proof of something no one in this house had expected to exist. My throat tightened as I realized what I was holding. Every argument I had heard, every accusation thrown between my parents, suddenly felt different, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't belong together anymore. And the worst part, I understood in that moment that whatever truth Grandma had hidden in this box, it wasn't meant to comfort anyone. It was meant to be found when lies finally became too loud to ignore. I didn't sleep that night. The wooden box stayed open on the floor of Grandma's room, as if closing it again would somehow undo what I had already seen. The letters, the documents, the quiet order of everything inside, it all felt too intentional to be ignored. Grandma hadn't left behind confusion. She had left behind direction. And now that I had seen it, I couldn't unsee it. Outside the room, the house was silent for once. No shouting, no arguments, just the distant ticking of the old wall clock and the occasional creak of wood adjusting under its own weight. It felt unnatural, like the house itself was holding its breath along with me. My hands were still shaking when I picked up the envelope with my name on it. Her handwriting was unmistakable, soft, slightly tilted, the kind of writing that looked gentle even when the words inside might not be. I stared at my name for a long time before opening it, as if I was afraid the paper itself might change everything I thought I knew. Inside was a short letter, "My dear child," it began. Just those 3 words made my chest tighten. If you are reading this, it means I am no longer there to explain things myself. I kept this truth hidden not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to see who would reveal themselves when I was gone. I paused. The room suddenly felt smaller. I continued reading. Family is not always measured by who speaks the loudest after death. Sometimes it is revealed by who cared when I was still alive and no longer useful to them. My fingers tightened around the paper. That sentence didn't feel like a memory. It felt like an accusation aimed at someone I knew. Or maybe more than one person. I turned back to the box. The documents inside were arranged like a timeline. Some were property records, some financial statements, and some handwritten notes explaining decisions she had made over the years. But the more I read, the clearer the pattern became. Nothing in that box was random. Every signature, every transfer, every note pointed toward a truth my parents had either misunderstood or deliberately ignored. And then I found it, a sealed folder marked in bold handwriting, "Final Intentions." My breath slowed. Inside were updated estate documents, carefully notarized, legally binding. But what made my stomach drop wasn't just what they said. It was when they were written. They were dated long after the version my parents had been fighting over, meaning there had been a change. A final decision, one that neither of them knew about, or worse, one they had chosen not to believe. My mind started replaying every argument I had witnessed, my father insisting Grandma trusted him more, my mother claiming she had been the one closest to her in her final days, both of them speaking like they owned pieces of her love. But the truth in my hands didn't belong to either of them. It belonged to Grandma alone, and she had made that very clear. There was a separate note attached to the documents, not legal language this time, just her words. To those who assume inheritance is a reward, remember, care is not measured when there is something to gain. I felt my throat tighten painfully. It wasn't anger I felt first, it was shame, because somewhere deep down, I had also stayed silent while everything turned into a fight. I had watched them argue and avoided stepping in, thinking it wasn't my place. But Grandma's words didn't allow that excuse anymore. I wasn't just a witness, I was part of what she was watching. The house creaked again behind me, and I almost jumped. For a moment, I felt like Grandma's presence wasn't gone at all. Just waiting, observing quietly from somewhere I couldn't see. As I continued going through the box, I found something else. Audio tapes, small, old cassette recordings labeled with dates. My hands hesitated again before I placed one of them near the old player in her room. The machine clicked, then whirred softly, and suddenly her voice filled the air. It was faint but unmistakable. "Today I signed the last revision," she said calmly. "I hope they understand one day why I did this." My heart pounded harder. Her voice continued, steady but heavy with something unspoken. "I gave them chances. I watched who visited me when I was weak. I watched who stayed when there was nothing left to take." A pause. Then softer, and I saw everything. The tape ended with a quiet click. I sat there frozen, the sound of her voice still lingering in the air like it hadn't fully left the room. Everything suddenly felt different. The fights, the claims, the accusations. They weren't just misunderstandings anymore. They were collisions with a truth that had already been decided long before Grandma died. And I was the only one who had seen it first. The morning after I heard Grandma's voice, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a sealed room waiting to be opened. I didn't tell anyone at first. Not because I wanted to protect them, but because I didn't know how to turn something so heavy into words without breaking myself in the process. The wooden box stayed in my hands like a burden that refused to be put down. Every document inside it felt alive now, like proof that had been breathing quietly for years, waiting for this exact moment. By noon, the arguments started again. They always did. My father stood near the living room window, speaking loudly into his phone. "There's no way she changed it without telling me," he said sharply. "I handled everything for her, everything." On the other side of the house, my mother was pacing, clutching a folder of her own. "She promised me," she kept repeating. "She promised I would not be left out." Promises, claims, assumptions. None of it mattered anymore. I walked into the room holding the wooden box. For a moment, no one noticed me. Or maybe they did. But I was just another silent presence in a house full of louder emotions. Then my father saw it. "What is that?" he asked immediately, his tone already defensive. My mother turned too, eyes narrowing. "Where did you get that?" I didn't answer right away, because in that moment I realized something strange. The truth doesn't feel powerful when you first hold it. It feels fragile, like it might shatter under the weight of disbelief. I opened Grandma's box. I said quietly. Silence hit the room so suddenly it almost felt physical. My father frowned. "That old thing, it's nothing. She never kept anything important there." My mother nodded quickly, as if agreeing would protect her version of reality. Exactly. She would have told us if anything mattered. I looked at them. Really looked at them. And for the first time, I didn't see my parents fighting over an inheritance. I saw two people afraid of being wrong. I placed the documents on the table. The sound of paper touching would felt louder than anything they had said in days. "There are updated papers," I said, "signed after the version you both are arguing about." My father froze. My mother stopped pacing. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then my father laughed short, disbelieving. "That's impossible. I was the one she trusted with everything legal." My mother stepped forward quickly. "No, she discussed everything with me. She would never change it without telling me first." I opened the folder marked Final Intentions and slid it forward. "You're both wrong," I said softly. "That's when the shift happened, not suddenly, not dramatically. Slowly, like a crack spreading through glass." My mother reached for the documents first. My father grabbed the other side at the same time. Their hands collided over the paper, not violently, but enough to show desperation. They read, line by line, word by word, and with every passing second, something inside the room began to collapse. Not furniture, not walls, ego. My father's grip loosened first. This can't be real, he whispered, but his voice had lost its certainty. My mother shook her head, eyes scanning faster now, searching for a loophole, a mistake, anything that could undo what she was seeing. But there was nothing. Grandma had been precise, intentional, final. She knew. I said quietly, she knew everything. The room went silent again, but this time it wasn't heavy with argument. It was heavy with understanding neither of them wanted. I expected anger next, or denial, or another explosion of accusations. But it didn't come. Instead, something worse settled in, realization. My father sat down slowly, like his legs had stopped obeying him. My mother remained standing, but her hands were shaking now, no longer steady enough to hold the papers properly. We were wrong, she said almost to herself. No one answered, because there was nothing left to argue. The truth had already spoken, and it didn't take sides. It only revealed patterns. Who visited when Grandma was sick, who stayed when she stopped being useful, who called her for love, and who called only when inheritance became relevant. The wooden box sat between us like a quiet witness, not accusing, not comforting, just present, as if it had finally done what it was built to do. My father exhaled slowly, the sound uneven. She watched us, he said faintly. My mother lowered her gaze, and we didn't even realize. For the first time since Grandma died, no one raised their voice. There was nothing left to fight for, not because everything was taken away, but because everything had already been decided. Not by courts, not by lawyers, but by a woman who had simply chosen to observe love when it was inconvenient and truth when it was uncomfortable. I looked at them both, feeling something unfamiliar settle inside me, not victory, not revenge in the way people imagine it, but clarity, because Grandma hadn't punished them. She had simply allowed them to become who they were when she was no longer there to benefit from their kindness. And in the end, that was enough to change everything. The house was quiet again, but this time it wasn't empty. It was honest.